We've got a really terrific speaker in the form of F. Kent Reilly III, who's professor and director of the Center for the Study of Arts and Symbolism of Ancient America at Texas State University. He's a widely recognized expert on the art of the ancient Olmec and the classic Maya. He's the author of many books and journal articles and has organized a number of major museum exhibitions focused both on Mesoamerican and on Mississippian art, and you'll be hearing mostly about Mississippian art tonight. His books include Ancient Objects in Sacred Realms, Sacred Bindings of the Cosmos, Visualizing the Sacred, seems to be kind of a theme here about the sacred, and he's also led 2 seminars at SAR, with a third on the horizon for 2018. His work continues SAR's ongoing commitment to the archaeology of the ancient Southwest and Mesoamerica. I give you Kent Reilly.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now let's see, yeah, it's working. You can hear me, right? Okay. Before I get started, let me just say that for the last 8 to 9 years, we've been working on an exhibition that will feature the treasures from the Spiro Mound in eastern Oklahoma. And if it had not been for the SAR and the Lannan Foundation, I don't know if it would have gotten done. But I think, we have an old saying in the Deep South, if you can't tell I'm a Southerner, from my accent, I say, there's a tin can out in the lobby, put your checks in there, okay, as you leave, and let's see if we can't make some money for them today. All right, so let me get started, okay? All right, now, exhibitions usually take 2 forms, okay? They can be a masterpiece show. You're all familiar with them, the works of Rembrandt, middle years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second kind of exhibition, and my favorite, is the exhibition that gives us a new paradigm. Okay. These are exhibitions designed to present paradigms through new interpretations of existing art. Okay. So our goal in this exhibition for Spiro is twofold. It's to showcase masterpieces, and I'm going to show you some masterpieces tonight. Okay. And it's to present major new interpretations about the nature of the Native American peoples in the eastern United States. I know all of you are so very familiar with the magnificent things created out here. Let me show you what was happening at approximately the same time in other areas. Now, I always am interested in how people get into things. Now, I'm not going to apologize for that picture. That was taken by one of my uncles in 1957. And at the Mississippian site of Moundville in Alabama, and I'm the boy in the striped shirt, right in the middle with my mother and brothers and sisters, but that's how long I've been involved with the art of the mound builders. Okay? Now, I got involved with the art of Spiro after I studied with Linda Shale, and I particularly focused on the Olmec material, and there's no writing system for the Olmec, so you had to come up with different methodologies to try to understand what the art meant. And it occurred to me that those methodologies that worked in Mesoamerica would certainly work, for the art of the Eastern North American Indians, and so I've been involved with that ever since. So this is the Craig Mound at the Spiro site with some of my always present graduate students being excited for being there. It's a triple mound, and it's the westernmost product of a culture that we call the Mississippian. The Mississippian culture existed from around AD 900 to approximately AD 1600, and it covered an area which is actually larger than Mexico. It just is, it's not as diverse, it's not mountainous, it's riverine. And our particular unit of study these days are the Doan people. And these are people that we can find them in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, in Louisiana, and even in Texas. And they were a people who acted as a cross-linkage between the cultures of the West and the cultures of the East, and were particularly interested in this site Spiro. And I'm going to get into Spiro's history here in just a second. It's right here. Okay. Now, Spiro comes to the world attention in 1935. That's what was happening in the United States in 1935. The bottom had fallen out, you know. People were fascinated by all sorts of higher tariffs and what was going to really happen with alcohol. But they were also fascinated by archaeological discoveries that were taking place in other parts of the world. And you all know this one, okay? King Tut. It had been discovered in 1922, and book after book after book came out recording the excavations of Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon in the tomb. So it was such a focus in the public mind that when Spiro came to the mind of the public, can you read the headline up there? It says, King Tut's tomb found in the Arkansas River Valley. Okay? King Tut's tomb. Okay? And essentially what had happened is, as I think we all know, conditions were very hard in the Great Depression. And a group of individuals had, five actually, had gotten themselves together and legally constituted themselves as a mining company, the Bacola Mining Company. And what they did was to go to Indian mounds and try to excavate for relics and sell them on the side of the road. Okay? We cringe in horror, you know, today thinking about this. I'll tell you more about what happened to the objects they found, but let me say that when the state of Oklahoma passed a quick law to keep them from doing any more excavation, it became apparent that they had discovered a hollow chamber inside the Craig Mound. Okay? And it was stuffed with goodies. I just don't know any other way to say it. You'll see. I'll let you judge. You tell me. And when they found out that the state was going to stop them, they took several kegs of gunpowder into the hollow chamber and blew it up. Okay, so you talk about the great American tragedy. There it is. Now, the WPA came back, okay, and excavated for several seasons. Here's one of the tunnels that leads into the hollow chamber. And let me just give you a dimension on the hollow chamber right now, okay? It's 15 by 15. 15 feet by 15 feet, all right? Now, one of the goals of the exhibition is to recreate the hollow chamber and put as many reproductions of the objects back in their original locations. And you might say, well, how the heck are you going to do that if they blew it all up? Well, fortunately, several of the looters, okay, kept careful notes about what they found, and they even drew maps. Okay, and they recorded where they found certain pieces. And this is we can't reconstruct it completely, but we are going to try to put the major pieces back where they belong. Now, essentially, this is their description of the hollow chamber. Okay, they call them altars, but actually they're stacks of blankets and woven baskets that we call Patacas. It's a Doan word. And these baskets contained sacred bundles. Okay, and they also contained the costumes of the gods, so that people went out dancing, they would wear the regalia of the gods. Now, let me just mention this one in particular. Okay, it was an altar. It turned out to be a stack of woven textiles beautifully woven textiles. I'll show you a couple of examples, okay, that were 5 feet tall. They had literally poured over them strings of beads, and sitting on top, right here, was a large basket with 12 gallons of pearls. 12 gallons of pearls. Okay? And they're freshwater pearls, and because they were inside a hollow chamber, they did not rot and decay. Yeah, you can say that again, brother. Now, this is what the Pecola miners were doing. They were selling the material that they recovered on the side of the road. Okay? And if it interests you, a string of beads was going for $2. Look at those points. You could have one for a nickel. Okay? And what's fascinating about the points, okay, they were never chipped to be used in hunting or warfare. As far as we can ascertain, these arrow points represented the souls of the departed, and they would be shot to get on the Milky Way, and which they call the path of souls, and get to the place that they were supposed to go. Now, pearls. Okay. Of course, they can't round them and polish. They couldn't round them and polish them the way we can. But I can tell you that the largest pearl that we're going to have in the exhibition is 1.5 inches in diameter. Okay? And that we will have over 1,000 pearls in the exhibition. Beads. Okay? Right now, it is estimated that the Pecola miners uncovered at least a totality of 30 gallons of drill beads. Shell beads imported from the Gulf Coast. Okay. Now, these are ear flares, copper ear flares, and we have 63 matched sets. And by matched sets, do you see the chain link? Yes, no. Do you see it? Okay, in the pair. 60 matched sets, and we believe that they probably represent ranking, that the people who wore them were high status individuals, and they showed their high status with ranking. Most of them are of wood covered with copper. And the copper is brought down from the Great Lakes. Okay. Now, this is what we call Arkansas River Doan. Spiro is right here. Arkansas right across the line. Okay. And what's incredibly interesting is this is on the very edge of that Mississippian world. Remember that map I showed you? Okay. Objects from all over the Mississippian world were brought to Spiro. None of it was made at Spiro, as far as we can ascertain. There are pieces from Etowah in Georgia, pieces from the Cumberland in Tennessee, pieces from Cahokia in Illinois. All this material was brought there, and we believe it was brought to accompany sacred bundles, okay, which is the highest form of worship, were these bundles, and they brought them to Spiro, okay? And no, I'm not going to tell you why. I'll tell you a little later, and we'll see if we can figure it out. Okay, so I said it was blown up, and this I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. See this young man right here? Okay. When a couple of archaeologists from Illinois drove up on the site, he was wearing one of the magnificent feather cloaks, and he was running around, and it was disintegrating. And I'll show you a reproduction of one of those feather cloaks. Now, Okay, here is the Craig Mound, okay, in the good old wintertime. And this is the cross section. And here's the hollow chamber, right there. And the hollow chamber sits on a platform which is in an area we call the Great Mortuary that is filled with burials and has incredible objects. And we think that the hollow chamber represents the sky realm, and the Great Mortuary with its burials represents the world of the dead. Okay. Now, several great art styles at Spiro. The most important are Braden and Craig. I'm going to be writing the Braden section of the catalog right here. Once again, all this material wound up in Spiro. Why? Well, I'll show you in a minute. Okay. Now, this is the heartland of Braden around Cahokia, and many, many objects, okay, traveled to other areas, we think, before they even got to Spiro out here in Oklahoma. And we see, in our mind's eye, we can reconstruct vast pilgrimage sets of people carrying these Patacas and sacred bundles, and they literally were bringing them to Spiro for a sacred reason. Now, the main events in Spiro history, you can read it, but this is what we're concentrating on right here. The Great Mortuary was constructed in 1400. And by 1450, the whole site was abandoned. Okay. Now, here's the reason what we think was happening. Is this entire area, the South, all the way across the Mississippi, into Tennessee, into Georgia, into Alabama, was hit by several great droughts. Does that sound familiar to you people here? In New Mexico, does it sound familiar about what happened to the Pueblo people? Okay. Some of these are the same droughts. Okay, and literally, these sacred bundles and the material that accompanied them were being brought to Spiro to try to do something about those droughts. Now, I said I was going to show you wows. How about this? Okay, this is the great Raptor. Sorry. That sits on the path of souls, which is the Milky Way, and he's very carefully picking someone's brains out, okay? Someone who couldn't answer the right question. He's a pipe, okay? And he was once covered in copper, and he's, for Mississippian statuary, he's big. This big, that big. Now get ready. How about that? Okay, that's its actual size. Okay? All right? Cale and flint, and there's over 20 of these in the hollow chamber. It's like Fort Knox. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this, okay? It's actually an effigy pupa. It's from the Great Mortuary. It probably, where's Dr. Ford? There he is. Remember we were talking about the hawk moth and datura earlier? Okay, that's the pupa of the hawk moth right there. And that, look at the skill. It's crystal. It's that big. From large to small. Now, we were talking about feather cloaks. Okay. We think there were over 40 of these. Some of them were hung from the ceiling of the hollow chamber. And we only have fragments, and we're putting a couple of them together for the exhibition. Okay. Cloth. Told you there were these stacks and stacks of cloth. We've been able to reconstruct some of the dance regalia that they wore. And this is an individual that we know as Morningstar. He's probably a major deity in the area of St. Louis, and he was probably the patron deity of the kings of Cahokia. Lots of stone material. Okay, some of these we don't know what's happened to them, but we're hot on the trail. Okay, this was all for sale, with strands of pearls, and then this statue, which you're going to see in just a moment. This is Morningstar. He was known in the early days as Big Boy, but we know that he's the god Morningstar, who brings the sun up out of the beneath world every morning. Okay, now I want you to look at this. That's a single piece of stone. Okay, all of these are single pieces of stone. This is the skill of these Mississippian artists. They could create things of this size. And I just love this one. You know, how many of you have seen Lord of the Rings? Come on, admit it. You know, it's great. You know, remember how they call their weapons? Leg smasher and head biter. And I see the teeth? Right here. This one, now I think we have a terrible word for things like this. We call it sociotechnic. And what it literally means is it's made in a form of something that could be used in actuality. If you got hit with that, you would seriously be hurt, but it would probably bust to pieces in the process. Copper. All sorts of magnificent copper profiles. I'll show you some of the birds later. And look at these copper feathers. Okay. Now, I learned a long time ago when you do exhibitions of this type, when you just put old cruddy copper out there, the general public goes by and says, ugh, what is that? And so we're making a point of making reproductions of these copper objects, when getting them all bright and shiny, so you can see what they would have looked like originally in the process. Carved shell. Okay, and I don't know if any of you have ever carved shell, but it is difficult. And look at the size of this Busicon right here. Those are my dainty hands. Okay, but when was the last time you saw a shell that big coming out of the Gulf? They don't make it that big anymore. They don't get that large. But they're all incised with an important material like these Spina serpents intertwined. Another one that shows a full-figured individual in the Craig C style. This one is about this. Okay. Now this is Morningstar. He's also a falcon dancer. Morningstar takes the form of a falcon dancer. This one, I'm just running through. I want you to see the wealth that was in there. This is one of the cat monsters that inhabits both the sky realm and the waters of the beneath world. And this is one of my favorites. This shows, let me show you a rollout. And the reason why I have this one right here is a few years ago I was adopted into the Eastern Creek Nation of White Earth. And I had this made for them as a reproduction, and they still use it in their rituals today. And you've got two individuals. Okay, do you see that they're part serpent? Okay, and this seems to be Mama right here. And her tongue actually makes a cleft in her back, and they emerge out of her body. And they're probably morning and evening star. Okay, lots of gorgets. I'm wearing one. To date, I dug. This is a reproduction of one I excavated when I was 17. Okay? And they were not convinced anymore that they were so much worn around the neck as attached to these patacas, these great woven baskets. Okay? Just brilliant. And if you've ever tried to carve one, oh boy. Now these are dancers, and they're dancing around a center pole which has been wrapped, and that's got a dance bustle attached to it. And this one in particular, we're working very hard on because we think it demonstrates one of the episodes out of the Morningstar story. Okay? If you'll look, you'll see we've got a monster right here, right? Got an individual here, there's his hairy head, and the monster's got his arm. Okay? And these individuals are, along with the third individual, are getting into it. We don't have time enough to go into that. The boy asked me afterwards. Now, I developed a way to look at these things. You know, we always are taught to see things in perspective. So I thought it would be easier to take these objects and literally cut them out and fold them up. This is what I do with my students. I make them do this process so they're able to see. And you can see that when you do that, to this gorget, you have two dancers, okay, dancing around a center pole. Do you see that? Okay. Now, we have fragments of the Patacas. The Patacas are beautifully woven, okay? And we're having Native American groups reconstruct 4 of them for us. Okay? They're float weave, they're double woven. And what they appear to have held, I said sacred bundles, but they also held the costumes of the gods, the regalia of the gods. Okay. For instance, look at this one. And what was inside it was a headpiece wraparound with bare teeth. Okay. And that one will be reconstructed for the exhibition. Oh, this is my favorite. As I always say, Temple Mayor, eat your heart out. Okay? Okay. This is woodpecker, hawk, and copper-headed axes, and that doesn't do it for you. Tell me if that does. Okay? And the eyes are shell, and the wood is cedar. And one of the Patacas held 16 of those. The eastern wall of the hollow chamber held a series of ancestor images. Most of them have been decayed. They're made out of cedar. They were probably dressed. They're about that. And they are probably not just ancestors, but they're gods in council. And I'll bring that out in just a moment. There were rattles in the form of turtles and cedar, wooden deer mask. And here he is. He's got, I'm fortunate enough to have a reproduction of that. This is Morningstar, or he who wears human heads in his ears. Okay? And he's also known as Redhorn. See his Redhorn? Well, let me tell you what's fascinating about this. You say, well, is that his hair woven? No, it's regalia. When you get the piece actually and put a magnifying glass on it, you can see the strings that tie it to his hair. It's all part of the regalia of Morningstar. And he's wearing a stone disc on his head and beads. The reason he's naked is he's one of the gods of primordial creation, when the forms of behavior that will be set in motion are not there yet. So most of these gods are shown without clothing. Here's his back. He's a pipe. He's drilled where he could be smoked. Okay. And interestingly, we find early representations of him in cave art that probably was made about 1200. This cave art was probably painted about 800. Okay, so he's a very old deity. And oh, this is my favorite. Boy, you don't want to meet that in a dark alley. Okay, see his peg teeth? Okay. This is the Lord of the Pleiades. This is the god of the Pleiades. And in Osage, which I won't even deem to pronounce, but I can just tell you what it means in English, is his name is he who holds a deer head in his left hand. Do you see it? That's how we know who it is. And he's got bear claws in his ears, and he also is a pipe. This is Turtle Man, who's also part of the Morningstar series. Okay, it looks like armor, but what it's supposed to be is the carapace and plystron of a snapping turtle. And if you look on his headdress, there's his name, Turtle. He's carrying it. And do you see what he's doing? He's using the special axe. He's removing the jaw of this captive. He's a war leader. Okay. Now, I've just went through, we've looked at some great stuff. Okay, now let me show you the new paradigm. New paradigm is really focused by Jim Brown and George Sabo. Jim is retired now. He was at Northwestern, and George Sabo is head of the Archaeological Institute for the state of Arkansas. Okay, they went back to that map that I showed you earlier and began to look at the pieces that they recognized, and they said, you know, we can do something with this. They placed them where they thought they might be. They reconstructed the relationship of the mound to the hollow chamber. Okay? And they noticed that all these pipes were all aspects of the Morningstar myth or story. Okay? They also noticed that these pipes could be set up as vignettes where they literally tell a story. I'm reminded of in a Roman Catholic church, you know how you have the Stations of the Cross, okay, and they're followed. This is the Stations of Morningstar and his conquest of the horizon. Okay, so they began to take a look at the hollow chamber. And this is, I won't read these out loud, but you just look at them. Look how much stuff there was, all right? Okay, pipes and pearls and maces and cane bundles and what Jim thinks is the burial, I do not, and the big boy pipe, stacks of blankets, 800 shell beads, just a lot of stuff. Okay, which brings us to the Pawnee Star Map. Okay, the Pawnee Star Map, when it was initially brought to the attention of astronomers right after the turn of the century, they were very excited. They thought it would show the heavens as they understood it, but they couldn't make any sense out of it. But the Bell Labs ran it through in 1983, and they suddenly realized that what you're looking at is the stars and their positions at the dawning of February 19th, AD 634. Okay, now, is that star map that old? I would doubt it, in the same way that we have biblical information copied over and over again. But this shows the day of creation, what the sky looked like on the day of creation. Okay, now, something interesting about these Doan people, and that is that they saw constellations as sacred bundles. They saw them as sacred bundles, and each of their villages had a relationship to one of these sacred bundles. Okay? Now, when Brown and George Sabo began to look at these things, they saw that the entire list of the powers that were important for the creation of the world were contained on this map. Sun, moon, black star, north star, wolf or wolf got fool star, wind stars, chiefs in council, which is Corona Borealis. Do you remember I told you we had 6 wooden men on the eastern side? Okay, and I showed you one of them. Okay, that's Corona Borealis, the way they're set up. Okay, so here we go. Here's the actual star map. Here's the sky with the different bundles. Here's the Milky Way. Okay, it runs across this way. Here's Corona. Now look at this. Here's the chamber. Okay. Here's the relationship. I can't even see that myself. Let me get out here. Yeah. Here's the Milky Way. Okay. All these objects we've been talking about were set up as if they were the inhabitants of that dawning sky. You are literally, when you look at the hollow chamber and its contents, you are looking at the dawning of creation. That day, creation day. Now let me ask you something. What did I say was going on in that area at this time? Drought. Okay, it was a terrible drought. Right now, we're looking at this explanation with the understanding that what they were trying to do when they made the hollow chamber was really, they were trying to recreate creation. They said, you know, things are messed up. Let's start all over again. Now, you've got morning star, you've got evening star, and they're at opposite ends of the hollow chamber. And running right through the middle, you've got the path of souls. Now, the path of souls is what all humans have to journey on in order to get where they're going. Remember, it literally splits the hollow chamber in half. And we know, we've been able to work out where the lodges of the gods are on the hollow chamber. And guess what? The positioning of these statues in the hollow chamber falls right where they would on the Milky Way. So you have right in the center, you have Earth Mother, okay, who is the ultimate provider, and the Raptor on human, who was intent on making sure that only the just got to the land of the dead. You probably have the chief of the gods, or first man, as he's known, sitting where he should sit in Corona Borealis. Okay. And we can position where all these people, all these pieces belong. Okay? And let me tell you something, folks. We have been working, as I said, about 8 years trying to find these pieces. Many of them are in private collections. And yes, we have the cooperation of Native Americans. The Native Americans that are involved with our exhibition are the Wichita and the Caddo, okay? And we had to convince them that even though these things were in private collections, they needed to be brought back for the first time since it was looted. And they agreed. They said, this is a good thing to do. And so that everyone will understand the greatness of their past, the wonderful intensity of their belief system. So, it's all about the path of souls, the Milky Way. And hopefully, when we finish with the exhibition, it will give non-Native Americans a fuller and intense view of their religious system. Because, I don't know, did you all take the same history of religion class that I did in college? Oh, bore. You know, it started first with you did Hinduism, and then you did Buddhism, and then you went to the religions of China, and then you went to, they didn't touch Africa, and then they went to the peoples of the book. And we started with, you know, first came Judaism, then came Islam, and then came Christianity, like there was an evolutionary path to it. Not a word was mentioned about Native American belief or about African belief, you know, which to me, as a teacher now, I know what a travesty this is, because I don't know about you, but my people have been here 200, 250 years, you know, about that long. And this is where we dwell, you know. Why shouldn't the history and religion of Native Americans be just as important to us as Egypt or Greece or Rome? These things ought to be in the textbooks for our children, okay? No longer should the American past be forgotten, because this is our history. It is our history, and we deserve to know it. Thank you very much.